Welcome to the Neuroveda Podcast for Complex Health. We feature expert guests who dive into ancient and cutting-edge understandings of health and disease. These conversations are about food, lifestyle, and medicine just as much as about nature, culture, and politics. I'm Jillian Ehrlich, family nurse practitioner certified in Ayurveda and functional medicine, coming to you from our clinic, Neuroveda Health in Seattle, Washington. And I'm so thrilled to again be bringing back one of our previous podcast guests. Her name is Vinita Prachi Murarka. Tell me one more time.
Vinita Prachi Murarka.
Murarka. So pretty. Vinita Prachi Murarka. So she is an Ayurvedic doctor, Waldorf educator, and transformational guide who bridges medicine, education, and spirituality. Born in India and raised in the United States, she later returned to India to immerse herself in Vedic sciences, gurukula education, and esoteric wisdom traditions. With over a decade of experience in integrative health and education, she brings a unique lens on health and human development. Vinita is the founder of Matre Sofia, an organization dedicated to soul-centered parenting and holistic family well-being. A storyteller, author, and curriculum developer, she translates ancient traditions into practical approaches for modern families and health practitioners alike. She currently lives between Hawaii and Colorado, consulting, teaching, and guiding others in aligning health, learning, and wholeness. Vinita, welcome.
Thank you, Jillian.
Sorry, I did not say your name clearly the first time. I apologize.
My students, they'd come up with a really nice acronym on how to say my last name. They said, it's moo like a cow, rar like a lion, and ka like a crow.
That is pretty great. And that is like on point. That is like on brand. The visualization and the storytelling that we're going to be talking about today. You have a new book that's just come out, which I'm going to hold up, which is gorgeous in so many respects. Wisdom Stories of India, Tales of Gods, Sages, and Sorcerers. So let's start out. I just want to like this is like way more important than my face. I just want to keep holding this book up. So pretty. And some of the illustrations are also so moving. So tell us first about your book, and when it's coming out and your inspiration for this amazing book.
Yes, so this book is coming out May 26, 2026, and it's part of a trilogy series from Shambhala Publications, Bala Kids, where the first book is from Tibet, the second from India, and the third from Japan. I got involved in this project through synchronicity and having written a children's book that's still not published, and my love of storytelling, especially living in India. So I moved back to India in my and I became deeply immersed within communities that really valued storytelling, especially a space called Moved by Love, where this group was really dedicated to taking wisdom stories from different traditions, bringing in teachers who'd, studied Kabir, studied Guru Nanak, studied the Vedas, and enlivening those within retreat settings. And so it's just, I think being a wanderer or a monastic, roaming through India, learning from different teachers, like everyone was telling stories. And so I wanted to present and share the beauty of that time and what I had received without people necessarily having to live in villages and take bucket baths and all of those kinds of things, where it's like, how can some of those wisdom stories that are so potent in spiritual transformation be accessible to everyone?
Fantastic. Fantastic. And it is true. It's interesting when you start getting into the sciences, what you learn is that anecdotes are considered one of the weakest, like scientific documentation methods, but they are the one that we as humans believe the most. I have a friend who blah, 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 this happened to them. And so there's this sense that, like, yes, we should run this test or do this intervention for 20,000 people with this drug, but that doesn't give us any indication of what happened in one person's life. And, we have 20,000, we have an average of 20,000, we have data, we have these numbers, but we have no true understanding of what happened to one person. And if we know what happened to one person who used this actual thing in their actual life, we actually have so much more data about them. Does that make sense?
It does. I think you're pointing to the value of case studies,
Yeah.
where rather than placebo double-blind trials, if we're looking at the value of case studies and what's present in those, that tells us how it might actually affect me in
Hmm.
terms of the signs and the symptoms. And within Ayurveda, one of the main forms of diagnosis is testimony, is shabda. What is that person telling us? Like, what is their narrative? How is their speech? Like that's telling us so much more about a person and their being. And I think this is where it's also going to the soul and the spirit. I think
Hmm.
stories by themselves, like they invoke a muse, they invoke that spirit of the collective, which then can be individualized, but then which can easily be put in the collective.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. Yes, very much so. And so talk to us a little bit about stories. Like what do stories do?
Oh my gosh, I love stories so much. I was like a total bookworm who was reading Harry Potter overnight when the newest book came out. I spent
Uh-huh.
more time indoors than in nature, which I think is unhealthy. But that was like my window into the outside world living in a small town in Indiana. So I think, like, first and foremost, stories connect us with the human experience, and then they help us connect with our own experience and see ourselves. Just like you were talking about, if someone else is saying, "Hey, I had this and I
Mhm.
got better," when we're reading the story of someone and they're going through trials, tribulations, they're talking about their lives, and you see them get through it, you're like, "Oh, yeah, this could happen to me too." I think foundationally, we're meant to sit around campfires intergenerationally telling stories. And I don't know of anyone who doesn't get drawn into a good story. Like, I mean, in a way, that's why television is so addictive,
Yes.
because there's all these stories going on. Are those the healthiest stories for our consciousness? Probably not, not most of them, I
Yeah.
think. But do they draw us in? Do they envelop our senses that we're so engrossed into
Yeah.
that versus anything else? Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I feel like that's what TikTok is. Even in some ways, even more than television. Well, I guess, absolutely television is stories, but I feel like TikTok is just story after story after story after story. And you just get a glimpse into people's lives, which is what we all think that we want. I think it's important to recognize that the, um, the stories without the connection can be harder, in some ways. Like it might not be what serves us best ultimately.
And I think that's, the mark of a good storyteller, because a storyteller and the way stories are passed, they're constantly changing, like according to the audience, according
Yes.
to who's present, like according to like a pin, not a pin dropping, but like something dropping, like a good storyteller is going to incorporate in all of that
Yes.
symbology, and it's
Yes.
going to nourish the spirit of who's
Yes.
present.
So I just have to say that, I have not been active on social media. And I think the reason is that I like being a storyteller. I like teaching and educating on Ayurveda and functional medicine and neuroimmunology to a particular audience because I will always change how I present it so that the audience can receive what they need. And putting together social media is talking into a void. There's no receiver. And so why even open your mouth? There's no receptacle for that education. Doing it off into the blue is
I think so. I think there's a different quality. I'm just opening up to social media because
yeah,
of the book release. And I was like,
yes,
this book, as you pointed out, is just when Sue's illustrations are just
so
so beautiful that I was like, this needs to be out there. And the
yeah.
way people are gonna know about it is through stories on social media. So I've been like calling in the people who would benefit from it and like speaking to
Yeah.
that energetic or that collective.
Yeah.
But I still think it is way more meaningful when it's in person.
So, talk to us a little bit about the different characteristics of stories or how you think about different types of stories or some of the muses from your stories and how you picked the stories for this book that you've picked.
So I can definitely talk about how did we choose these stories because there's hundreds of stories in India. India has over 700 languages, so many different religions, that one of the foundational principles that I had when I was approached to be a storyteller for this series was that I wanted to make it multi-religious, multicultural.
Mhm.
Because when people think of India, they're often thinking about Hinduism or sometimes Buddhism. And there are so many religions that have come from India, including Jainism, including Sikhism. And like India is really known as a melting pot
Mm.
for religions and religious tolerance. And there's teaching stories that are within all of these religions. So the last story in the book is the story of the elephant and the six blind men, or we have the six blind children in this book, where everyone is sitting in the dark and they hear an elephant come up and they go, they're feeling around it. And one person's saying, it's a fan, it's a wall, it's a, pillar, it's a broom. And they all are totally convinced that it is
Uh-huh.
exactly what they're talking about, but they're touching a totally different aspect of this huge, vast elephant. And each of them just has one aspect of the
Mhm.
picture, and they're arguing is what does this elephant look like? And they can't see, but only when it's daylight are they going to see, oh, this is what the whole elephant looks like.
Yes.
And when we're talking about culture, when we're talking about truth, when we're talking about divine knowledge or oneness, it's kind of like that. There
Hmm.
are a lot of stories that are pointing to one direction or one aspect of the elephant, but you really need all of them to know what the elephant is all about, just like you need all of these stories to really have an understanding of the beautiful, rich tapestry of Indian wisdom that's been passed down for thousands, if not almost tens of thousands of years. So these stories are coming from that. Like that's a foundational principle. And then a secondary principle has been looking at a gender balance. A lot of stories, um, especially that are more easily accessible, have male leads. And as a Waldorf educator and former teacher, I was like, we really need strong female leads too. And that's not to go into like the esoteric aspect, but just because girls want to see themselves as leads. I
Mhm.
still remember me telling the story of Mother Teresa in second grade in the Saints curriculum. And I had this beautiful Indian girl, and I'm like setting the stage around India and Mother Teresa and Calcutta and the broom, and I'm bringing in this imagery, and I just saw her eyes relax and this deep sigh of like, oh my gosh, you're telling a story from my lineage, from my culture. There was this resonance that was there within the field.
Mhm.
So I really wanted to bring in, strong female characters. Laura
Mhm.
Burgess and I both wanted to do that, and we did. And also have these stories that can connect to people regardless of culture, but also have a space for children of Indian descent to be able to recognize themselves, whether they're from a Hindu background or Jain, Sikh, Parsi, Muslim. And we know that, Indian Christian children do have access to like a greater sense of stories that are present, not just within media. So it was about creating that accessibility as well.
Amazing. I mean, I love, even in the first story about Krishna, he's kind of a naughty boy sometimes and he eats butter and they're picking Marion berries and he eats all the berries that everybody else is picking and he is still beloved. And I think that it's so important because children will experiment. And I think I feel like a lot of education has come to rely so much on either violence or shame or denigration as a way to demand obedience. And so the idea that you can eat everybody else's berries and all your friends can be annoyed with you and you can still be beloved. I think that's an excellent contradiction.
And I think, in indigenous stories, as well as in Aesop's fables, the fables talk about our lower nature.
Yeah.
They're talking about us wanting to take all the mulberries and about like hoarding, like they're bringing those aspects of like this is a normal part of human experience.
Yeah.
Let's laugh, and you're still God, you're
Yeah.
still
You're
divine
still
being,
God. You're
and you
still
can
God.
still totally be naughty and mischievous. And then there's your higher nature, which is
Yeah.
this beautiful God who is an embodiment of the cosmos, which really every human being, every child is an embodiment of the cosmos and the five elements and like the miracle of nature.
Mhm.
So I feel like stories are bringing in that wisdom in really subtle ways where it's not like moralistic or telling you what to do. It's showing you. It's like the same
Mm.
way that children are learning through imitation. It's more what you do rather than what you say to do that they're going to be copying from their parents, their teachers, the adults, and even the children around them. These stories are kind of saying, we know you're naughty. We know you're going to do this.
You're gonna eat all the berries. You
Yeah.
are gonna. Yes.
But we also know, not that this story is in here, but in the Bhagavad Gita, that you're also an incredibly loyal friend,
Mm.
Krishna, who is going to counsel your best friend and be in battle with him when he is up against all of these forces, like hundreds and thousands of beings. And while he's a bit mischievous and playful, he's still going to be the loyal friend and moral pillar who's going to fight alongside and be there no matter what.
Yes. That balance, I think finding that light and that balance is such a tricky thing as a human being. In one of the stories about the snake in the woods, could you talk a little bit about that story and kind of like that teaching of, the difference between biting and hissing and yeah.
So, is it okay if I tell the story, Jillian, for the
Please,
listeners?
please.
So, this is the story of the monk and the cobra, and it's originally a Jain story. And
Mm.
it's about this venomous snake. You know, cobras are pretty scary. This cobra would just anyone who walked through the woods would bite it or eat them, and people started disappearing. And of course, the humans are very, very agitated and upset at this snake who is destroying their community in a
Mhm.
way, which we can say, bullies. It could be. It's a big bully or she's a
Mhm.
big bully. And Mahavir, the monk, he comes in and he's going to a destination, and someone says, you can go through the jungle, which is quicker, but you're going to encounter this really nasty snake.
Mhm.
Or you can take the safer route and go around. And the monk has had this cultivation where he's not afraid of violence. He's not afraid of the wounded. He's not afraid of this overly aggressive snake. He has a lot of love and compassion and is in unified consciousness. So he goes, meets the snake. The snake tries to bite him. And, just like the story of Angulimala within the Buddha stories, he says, you don't need to bite me. You don't need to hurt me. You don't need protection from me. I'm not going to harm you. Even if there are other humans who have harmed you, I won't.
Mhm.
And so he encourages the snake to, stop killing other humans and allow humans to go through. Peop and so the snake like feels Mahavir's compassion, and Mahavir goes on his way. And then when Mahavir comes back, he sees the snake, and the snake is bleeding, is totally wounded. And he says, what happened? And the snake says, well, I stopped being violent, but then people were throwing all these stones at me because they were angry. And then they thought that they could abuse me, And the snake is sad because she's trying to imbibe these teachings, but
Mhm.
then like totally getting hurt in the process. And he
Mhm.
says, I just told you not to bite or to kill. I did not tell you not to hiss. And so this
Yeah.
is really this lesson of, in a subtle way, of protect yourself, set strong boundaries when you need to, but don't hurt people when it's not necessary. So I think this goes into like stand up for yourself, have courage, and like you don't have to give up your nature completely. But I think it's like really a martial arts story of
It is.
if
Yeah.
you're smart, like you puffing up your chest, like in front of a bear, or you standing your ground is going to tell the opponent, don't mess with me. But
Mhm.
you never have to actually spar.
Or if you do, like in the Bhagavad Gita, when they go to war, you can, if you need to fight the fight, fight the fight, but don't fight the fight for the sake of the fight or preemptively.
Mhm.
Do that with essentially sadness or grief in your heart for the fight that has to come, but then perform as is necessary to keep things right in the universe. So yeah, I really appreciated that story. A lot of these stories, they're not, it's interesting because as you were talking about stories around a campfire, I was like, wow, we all like, I have so many deep core memories of like scary stories around a campfire, which is so fun because then there's so much the crackle of energy and electricity in the air, ghost stories.
Mhm, mhm.
But that's part of it. And a lot of these stories are stories about people and children and women doing things and accomplishing something or understanding something. Yeah, and but they span the gamut of human experience. They're not kumbaya stories. They're not like we all just got along and everything was beautiful.
Well, because that is not how we are. Like when you mentioned the Krishna story,
Yeah.
his brother was very upset. He had worked so hard, and
Yes.
his younger brother ate everything. And how many of those like older sibling stories are there in our own lives? I'm an
Yeah.
older sibling where you're like, why does the younger one get away?
Everything. Never in trouble. They can do whatever they want. The older sibling, I'm an older sibling as well. And I always think the older sibling is the first pancake. It's the one that gets burnt. Second one is the one that comes out fluffy and has the easier life. Yeah.
And when I in Waldorf, when we tell the fairy tales, we actually go back to the original Brothers Grimm's versions
Mm,
instead of the Disney versions.
mm,
And it's because there's more darkness. There's more honesty and darkness in the Brothers Grimm's fairy tales. And
mm,
this is priming children and their psyche of saying the world is not going to be all kumbaya. It's not going to be easy. And like know that there are going to be enemies.
mm.
That's, everyone in unity is a friend, but like in life, it's going to feel like some of those people are enemies. The Siddhartha story with the swan, it is
Yeah.
his cousin who is malicious, who
Yes.
is, trying to kill Siddhartha, who ends up being the Buddha. And so this is real life.
It's so interesting. There's at my son's Waldorf school, which we were just talking about before the show started. I learned about this particular school, Waldorf school in Seattle, because you told me about it when we were at that Vedic storytelling conference where we met in Taos, New Mexico. Such a strange place to learn about a school that is 3 miles from our house. Thank you. But they have vocabulary words, and they just were doing the Odyssey, and the vocab word of Odyssey is like a long wandering journey with variable changes of fortune. And what I really appreciated is that being trained by sitcoms in the 80s, it was like there was a misunderstanding, there was a problem, and then it was all wrapped up in 30 minutes. And everybody gets along at the end. It's all okay. But the idea that really the Odyssey is a long wandering journey. So you sort of have a purpose and you might not sometimes know always what it is, and that there's variable changes in fortune. It does not say it ends well. It also does not say that it ends unwell, or it's not a tragedy, and it's not, you are the hero because you stay in the game. And I think that is a very different message for children that I think is very useful lesson for life, because we can go for years without knowing like who are we or what are we doing. We just know that we have to continue doing what we're doing right now for ourselves or our children or those around us or for the world, or we've made a commitment. And so we have to see this component through. And we may not know if it's a success or if it's a failure until maybe even decades down the line. I mean, certainly with children, it is a long wandering journey with variable changes in fortune.
Lots of temperamental changes.
Lots of temperamental changes, and you don't know. You can go years with feeling like, your children are not where you want them to be, or you're not where, and maybe it's your fault as a parent. And then maybe it's years of them succeeding and you're like, "Oh, I'm pretty great." And then it's years of them failing. And so we have to just let go that sense of good or bad. We have to just live with the sense that we are something beyond good or bad. We are something beyond we belong here because we're here and we're in it for those variable changes of fortune.
Jillian, this is definitely reminding me of the Tibetan horse story. And I don't think it's just in Tibet. I think it's around various cultures where the farmer, has horses, has a horse
Yes.
that wanders out, and the entire village is like, that's so sad. That's so sad that your horse is gone. And the farmer said, we'll see, let's see. And then the horse comes back with a bunch of different horses, and everyone's so excited, like, it's so great, all these horses have come back. And the farmer just says, we'll see, we'll see. And then his son is riding one of the horses and falls, and everyone says, that's so sad, that's so sad. And the farmer, being the equanimous, wise being that he is, having tended all these crops, gone through droughts and large abundances, says, we'll see, we'll see. And then the soldiers come to enlist more young men into the draft. And because that boy was riding a horse and fell off and had broken his leg, is saved. And there's the idea of, okay, we'll see, we'll see.
Yes. Yes, I think that I feel like that's another piece. I don't know why I keep thinking about social media, but I feel like it is in some ways our modern storytelling venue, and I'm really coming to grips with it. But it's one of those things like social media can everybody wants that viral post, because popularity is what's going to win you power and notoriety. And then if there's like a scandal, a social media scandal or a public scandal or a political scandal, it's like, oh, you're ruined. And so there's such this sense of make or break, but it is so relevant that what we take from any particular experience in our life is our individual growth. And we don't know, I've had patients who have said that their heart attack was the best thing that ever happened to them because it made them really focus because they lived for one, and because it allowed them to really kind of gave them permission to focus just on their health. And because of that, they have no back pain or their weight's been stabilized or they're exercising more or their mental prowess is clearer. So obviously that's not for everybody, but our hope is that in the treatments that we do and in the stories that we tell, we come to understand our experiences in ways that put ourselves forward, in ways that let our spirits grow, connect.
I agree with that. When you were speaking of that, I was thinking of the Chandanbala story, the Indian, the Jain Cinderella story of this princess who has everything. I mean, she has gold, jewel encrusted shoes, living in a palace with a,
Me too.
like she's definitely got it made. War through circumstances beyond her control, she is sold into what could have been slavery, rescued, and then doing good deeds. But then, because of her beauty, is, totally tore down by another woman. And how many, I definitely know I'm afraid of social media because I'm afraid of like the hating comments that might
Yeah.
that might come, or jealousy or that kind of competition. And she experienced that, but then she like continued her inner practice, and there were allies, and eventually she made it back up. Like she became a princess again through the story.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're talking about with that perseverance and developing virtues inside oneself, like the virtue that she had is, even though she was in shackles, waiting for someone to take those shackles off, she was cooking lentils. And she said, there might be someone less fortunate than me who I can offer these lentils to. And she does. And I think when we're talking about the archetype of stories, there's this archetype of simpleton, of someone who's very simple, very focused on helping others. And there's all these fairy tales where simpleton does one good deed, does two good deeds, does three good deeds, and he's not necessarily the most handsome or the smartest, but he's pure of heart. And then he's the one who wins the princess, which is to say that when we act positively in the world, when we are of service to others, when we're doing seva, eventually our spirit and our soul, or we could say our higher self and our human body, like those are going to merge and be coherent. And that's the alchemical marriage at the end of many stories. It's saying, I have now unified with my highest self and my
Yeah.
highest potential, my service. And that's what all of these are leading to. How do we do that?
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. Tell us some of the other stories in the book. How did you pick some of the other stories?
Well, some of them were like my favorites.
Which is your favorite? That's a good thing to know. Which one is your favorite?
But they're also good in their own ways. It like depends on who I'm telling the story to. But one, I'm going to share two of my favorites. One of the ones that's my favorite is a game of chess with
Mm.
the two characters of Akbar and Birbal.
Mhm.
Akbar is a highly intelligent Mughal Muslim king, and his most trusted advisor is Birbal. And in India, there's all these comic books with their stories, and I grew up reading these and
Huh?
seeing, and Akbar and Birbal are playing chess, drinking saffron milk. And I'm gonna give a hint. All these stories have Ayurvedic principles in here that have been nestled in of Ayurvedic foods or herbs that there's going to be some social media about going deeper into
Great,
that.
great.
So they're drinking their saffron milk, playing chess, and Akbar is asking these questions to test Birbal because they're constantly like edging one another, just like chess players do. And the last question that Akbar asks Birbal, he gives him a chalkboard and
Mhm.
he says, here are two lines on the chalkboard. How do you make this shorter without erasing?
Mm.
And Birbal's super quick. He
Mhm.
takes the chalk, makes one line longer.
Mhm.
And it's the end, and then there's the checkmate. And there's all these wanderings of like cute stories of someone harassing Akbar in the court, which is his grandson. So I just find it to be one of the most comedic ones, but
Mhm.
also as a practitioner, as a human being, as someone who is in what seems to be sometimes a hyper competitive world
Mhm.
where it is so easy to be not enough. Like before, as a practitioner, you're looking at your own community. And now with digital media, we're looking at a global community or at least a national community. And there's definitely insecurities. Like I feel insecure about my practice sometimes, or how I'm coming across, or like, do I need to go viral so people find me? But the chalkboard story to me just like reminds me that it's just about becoming better, like better in oneself, like refining my craft, refining my skill. And when I'm interacting with patients, with clients, that's that refinement. And oftentimes, my little line is not always having the greatest knowledge, even though there's knowledge attached. It's about having presence and
Mhm.
heart. And like sometimes that humor, of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
getting someone out of their shell and saying, I know I'm asking you to make so many changes in your life, but you can, like
Mhm.
giving that fortitude. So that's the story that feels most
Mm.
relevant to me, like in my own daily life as an adult. But then I also have this other favorite story of Durga.
Yeah.
And like why I love that so much is because the way it's so intrinsically connected with my culture and with my guru. Like my guru is considered an embodiment of that Durga wise protector, mother, matriarch energy. And the way this story is actually from Alakananda Ma, who is an Ayurvedic doctor, and she told this story to us during our
Mm.
Ayurveda training. And it's also, I'm from the state of Gujarat, where we are dancing for 9 nights, like around stories of this goddess, as well as it's one of those fundamental stories around a woman hero, like around a hero who is protecting the environment, who is protecting the children, who like is fierce. She rides a lion. She's beautiful. And I love this story because as I've been speaking with Indigenous mentors, they've been talking about this time of prophecy. And they're saying that this new age that is coming is the time of women.
Mm.
It's time again for women-led or feminine-centric leadership of counsel from the women. Because just like in the Durga story, how there's this demon who is polluting the air and the water, destroying the crops. Let's talk about glyphosates and
Yeah.
inorganic farming. Let's talk about big industry that has been polluting the land and the water. And it's not safe for children to play outside. A modern story that we saw in a movie about this is Erin Brockovich.
Yep.
She was Durga, like totally
Yes.
fighting for all of these people and their environmental health for the children so that they would not get cancer, for people's homes. And so I think this is the story of our advocates, of our protectors, of people who are fighting for justice out of love. It's about that connection of you really have to take in all the resources from the gods, from the spiritual world, that inner well of all the tactics. You know, those are the 10 arms with all the weapons. You can try peace, you can try like specific targets, but we need all of these weapons to truly live and protect our planet for ourselves and future generations. So that one also connects to Women of the Trees, which is the second to last story in the book. And Women of the Trees is a fairy tale that Laura and I created. I retold it. We made it into a fairy tale from a biography of the Chipko movement. And I really wanted to put that in because I'd met Julia Butterfly Hill at Spirit Rock in Northern California and was just inspired by this really intelligent, soft, fierce woman who had such a strong connection with nature. You know, she's the modern or contemporary woman of the trees that children will know of in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So tell us what Chipko means. Tell us the story and where it kind of the biography pieces about where it came from, the real life origin story.
So this is one that I would have to read, which I can read if we have time, or I can tell you about the origin. The origin is of a woman named Goda Devi in Himachal Pradesh. And the real life story is that there was a logging company coming in to destroy the forest where these people got their honey from, got their wood from, as well as had the indigenous connection with the land. This was their sense of home, their sense of place. And I didn't really want to go into corporate greed into the story. So we have the greedy king who wants to build his summer palace because if we even think about it, a lot of this timber is potentially going for buildings. And this king is doing it out of his own fancy. Even though he's supposed to be the steward, he is going to be destroying this land. And Goda Devi has this vision of seeing axe cutters come in and fell the trees. And she has had a prophetic dream. And how many of us get prophetic dreams or have inspirations or knowings, and we know that we need to act. And so with the prophetic dream, she gathers all the women in the neighborhood. She says, something is about to happen. We need to protect our forest. And the women gather around the trees. They hold hands and they say, please do not fell our forest. This is our home. This is where the birds live. This is where the light comes in. This is where our bees are. Please don't take our home. The axe cutters can't do anything. They're trying to lift their axes, but they're not going to hurt these women, and nor can they do anything really because they're under the order of the king. So they're pawns in a way to speak. And the king comes and is like, what's going on? You know, I thought the felling was going to start. I'm waiting on my summer palace. And his two children come in and they see the women gathered around singing songs and they join the music. They are gathering around these revolutionaries singing to protect the trees. And they also love the forest. They've been enchanted by the forest. They've played in this nature. And being in their innocence, they don't need a summer palace, you know, they don't need to have a palace. And they said, Daddy, Daddy, can you please protect the trees? And
Mm-hmm.
young children are looking up at him, and a butterfly comes and is on his nose, and he's singing, seeing the women singing, and he says, No, I'm not going to build my summer home. My children need a space to play. And this is the story of women protecting their land, protecting their nature for their children, for nature, for the animals, for the well-being of the trees and their way of life from greedy corporations. There's that strong enough connection to nature and dignity that they're willing to do that.
Amazing. And so the word chipko,
What does Chipko? Tree hugger.
yeah, hugging. In the book, it was hugging.
It means hugging. Chipko, the Hindi word,
Mhm.
literally means to like get stuck to.
That's so nice.
And so when you get stuck to someone or you like you're hugging them,
Yeah.
that's what Chipko means, the one who is stuck to or the one who is hugging.
Yeah. Amazing.
So that's the original tree hugger. Like that's where the
Yes.
word comes from.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Can you talk to us just for a Western mind that might not be savvy as to like what is the difference between Muslim and Hindu versus Sikh versus Buddhist versus Jain versus Zoroastrian?
Yeah.
How can a Western mind think about these
So
words, religions?
want to bring a little, you're the first, podcast that knows about this, that there's a little symbol key in the back
Mm-hmm.
where the main symbol for each of these religions is listed here. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you open up to a story, like The Power of Words with Kabir, there'll be little symbols related to that story. So Kabir has the Hindu, Islam, and Sufi symbol because it's a story told in all of these religions or spiritual practices.
Mm-hmm.
So, with this, India is so diverse. There are so many religions that are present in India, and there are also stories that are from these religions or originating from these religions, but then they've been woven into, right? Like the horse story, the Tibetan story that I just shared. I think it's also within Judaism and within Christianity, and as well as the elephant story that we talked about. So I think a good way to look at it is these are religions and different cultures that are present in India. And there are practitioners of these religions in the United States. They may be Indian or they may not be, but especially if you're in a major city like Seattle, you're actually going to have practitioners of all of these religions in your city. And so they're a way to just recognize that it doesn't really matter which religion a story originates from, even though it can create a deeper connection to that religion or that culture. It's about allowing it to be a window for you, but also just taking the message. That's where it becomes archetypal. Like there's the same themes in all the stories, regardless. And so that I think is that crux of storytelling, that we're using images that might be more familiar to one person or to another. There's goddess stories, there's these similar stories even within Norse mythology, but you're just using symbology from the landscape or to create that. So I would say for people who are reading this book, especially those who might not be from Indian descent, take in the rich imagery, like look at Wen's gorgeous pictures, like let
Amazing.
that beauty and those details and the cute animals enliven you, like,
Mhm.
and allow whatever those qualities of trickster or warrior, protector of the environment speak to you, because these are qualities and virtues that are present in every spiritual practice, in every religion, regardless of its specific origin. And then
Yeah.
if you feel inspired, if you want to know more, then there's ways to enter deeper into those.
It's so interesting because I think in this country we think so much about that people of different religion would look different from us. I suppose not with like maybe Catholics and Protestants, might assume that they would look the same, but people celebrating Jewish people are assumed to look sometimes the same, but sometimes different than Hindu people or Christian people, or so we think of that there's so much more cultural differences versus religious differences. And so, people in some of these different religions may actually eat the same foods and live in the same place and farm the same farms so that, what is different is a belief system or a language around values, but everybody lives together harmoniously.
And I was just in Kerala, and I was in a Muslim township in Kerala, which has a very strong Christian influence in India. And I went to, like, just outside, I went to a postpartum Ayurvedic center where people are
Mm,
coming and getting 40 days of care.
amazing.
And that postpartum center, which was Ayurvedic and Unani medicine, was run by a Muslim doctor, and
Mhm.
there were Christian and Hindu staff, and there were patients from multiple religions that were there
Uh-huh.
because the foundations of health are the same. Sometimes the diet looks different, like who's eating meat, who's not eating meat. A lot of the spices can actually be similar. And
Mhm.
so I'm going to read the second part of the dedication. May these stories be a mirror for those with Indian roots and a window of possibility for all of us as we live our multicultural future.
Beautiful. And that is something the story, the mirror versus window or window is something we talked a little bit about in our first podcast, but can you highlight a little bit more about what that is and not only in terms of a definition, but like it is such a relevant concept to understand. So, can you go through that again, please?
I'm happy to, Jillian.
Thank you.
So, a mirror story is one in which you see yourself. You can really identify with the character. And the clearer the mirror is, the more it'll seem like that's exactly what I'm going through. But all stories, in a way, are mirror stories on the psychological level. And then a window story is a window where it might not look like your direct experience, but it is giving you an idea of how other people live or how something your friend might be going through. So when we're looking at educational curriculum, like especially in the United States, it's for a long time, it wasn't a multicultural curriculum. It had heavily white characters, oftentimes male characters. And as the book industry has changed and as there have been different authors, you see more people who are experiencing things similar to you. Like in this book, Chandan Bala is running out with achar and flatbread. Like those are things that I'm eating in my house. Cooking lentils, so those are foods that I know of that give me a sense of recognition and a sense of place and belonging within a larger cultural narrative. Whereas stories, if I'm reading about someone from a different race or background than me, or different even economic status, it's giving me a sense of empathy. There's still shared experiences that are like oftentimes with teen books, you're like, yeah, I feel the same way. Doesn't matter what difference there are, but it's also giving me an idea of how different people are interacting. And I think a series when I was growing up that was really popular were the Gilmore Girls.
Mhm.
And it was like there were so many different windows that Rory, as a lead character, was experiencing. Like one, there was a really strong single mom, and so people were empathizing with her. And then Rory is dealing with being from a small town, going to Yale, like what it's like to be in a different social strata. She has boyfriends who like don't fit in. So I think there's always stories that we see on television, within books, within our own lives that have both.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to have both because especially if you're not able to travel, and experiencing different cultures, books are that gateway, like gateway to learn about how other people live. And it gives a foundation for multicultural understanding, for higher levels of education. The books that I read as a young child, they provided me so much foundation for life as an adult that I wouldn't have known about.
Absolutely. 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 Amazing. And so your book is going to come out May 2026. And so if you're listening to this show afterwards, you can go get it. And if you're listening to the show sooner than that, you can pre-order. We encourage pre-orders.
Mhm.
And what would your hope be for like who would get this book or how it would be used?
Honestly, I want everyone to have this book. I was like, if it was my ideal like imagination,
Yeah.
everyone would have this book as their coffee table book
Yeah.
because the images are extraordinary that while I want you to read it, of course I want you to read it. We told these stories. Just
Mhm.
looking at the pictures will inspire you.
Yeah.
Some other audiences are definitely Waldorf teachers. This is like
Mhm.
foundational for the fifth grade curriculum where India
Mhm.
is brought in. The story of the churning the ocean of milk. I would love for this book to be in every library in the children's section, to be at all the elementary schools. And like this was really designed as like a more catch-all anthology for Indian culture. So like I would want this book to be in all the schools in the United States, eventually to India. And what is interesting is it's already been picked up in Russia.
Amazing. Amazing. By the school system or
No, by a publishing house.
by a publishing house? Oh my gosh, amazing. Amazing. Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
exciting. Congratulations. It is true that when I look at stories from my 11-year-old son about kind of a lot of the stories, like even the Aesop's fables stories that I had from childhood, when I look back, I think, oh my God, these are like the language is not good. Like they have references to people's races that we will not use now. Some of them have they're from just a solely a patriarchal point of view, some of them. And so, I think it's hard to find stories that are written in a voice that is for children, that include exactly like you were saying, that Brothers Grimm approach, where it is not all rainbows and candy, where there are hard things. And I think we underestimate the amount of hard things that children actually go through. I think that being a child can be very challenging. It is a very powerless time of life. And even if you're very well taken care of, it is the first time that you are doing all of the things that you are doing. And so you have no assurance that any outcome will be any direction. And I remember thinking that as a kid. I remember
Mm.
thinking, like, well, I don't know what to do here. And, once I do it once, I'll know. Big fight with a friend and figure it out. You realize you live,
Mhm.
but it's very hard. It's very hard to grow up a person.
Yeah. I mean, like, this really is a battlefield.
Yeah.
We talked about the Bhagavad Gita. There's other Durga or Kali stories where she's battling with all these thought forms. And like so many of these stories have bullies in them.
Yeah.
There's like a bully character, or there could potentially be a sense of being victimized by what has happened, whether your life has been stolen, whether harsh words have been said to you. We also know as practitioners that there are children working through illness, right? Dealing with difficult things. It could be chronic, there could be terminal illness, there could be death. And there's stories like The Power of Words with Kabir, where what you're thinking, what you're saying to yourself,
Mhm.
what other people are saying to you could heal you. And
Mhm.
so I don't know why I feel like crying. There's like these stories are so fundamental to
Mhm.
our human experience and for adults as our inner child. And then
Mhm.
as practitioners, like for our patients, to give them hope of what's possible and to like battle through whatever chronicity that they're dealing with and give them hope. And then for children to like continue to have the images that are nourishing them from culture, from the spiritual world of being able to fight if you need to fight, being able to fight, but
Mhm.
also be able to have discernment to take the actions that you need to. And I truly think that depression and suicide is on the rise, not only for children, but for adults, because there are a lack of stories
Mhm.
and as well as lack of support that help one go through what Joseph Campbell called the hero's journey
Mhm.
of it is going to be difficult. You may not want to do it. There are going to be challenges. There are demons or dragons that you're going to have to face. But in the end, there will be some reward. We're in a challenging time. And
Yeah.
I know that stories are morally fortifying. And
Yeah.
I know they give us context of how to move forward. And I also know that's why some of these stories have been around for thousands of years because they're
Yeah.
still relevant.
Yes. 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 Pretty amazing. I read something the other day about like the power of instituting and like an hour before bed for children where the whole household is together and off screens and either talking or reading, even just silently reading, but being together and being silent and being off screen. So, just the idea that it can feel like such a void when we drop out of those dopamine hits of screens,
Mhm.
but you're really dropping into something that is so much more nourishing. And I think it can be challenging even to talk with kids, even with adolescents or with young kids of any age about kind of what does life mean and how are they understanding things. I really see books like yours, this book in particular, being a great conversation starter for kind of like reading a story and then talking about what does it mean and what are we learning from it and how have we experienced that in our own lives and where are there places where things are tight or where are there places where we've had to call in other power? Where have
Mm.
been places where we've had to hug trees and hope for the best? And where have we been able to rescue others? And where have we needed to be rescued? I'm really grateful that you put this book out. And I've looked, to be honest with you, I've looked for years for storybooks. And because I agree with you, I always have that stories are so important for understanding ourselves and for giving us a place in the world. And when we belong, that is the first kind of I think right of humanity is that we belong. We are going to be good and evil. Each of us is going to make mistakes and do glorious things. But I think belonging, the nature of belonging and understanding our belonging is one of the key elemental things that we can learn. And I think stories really do give us place, both the mirror and the window stories. So thank you so much for writing this book.
You're welcome. And Jillian, thank you for sharing that importance of bonding, of family bonding at the end of the day. Some of these stories came to me from my grandparents. When my grandmother would visit the United States, she would tell me stories about Krishna as I was falling asleep in her lap
Oh,
after
yeah.
school. And
Yeah.
then my grandfather, who's no longer in his body, would tell me stories from the Ramayana or the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
And so, like these, like for me, when we're talking about dopamine, it actually moves into oxytocin. I
Yeah.
move into memory and love and feeling so held. And like those are my fondest memories. And feeling not only a sense of belonging, but also continuity.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you. We look forward to reading this book more, sharing it with our friends and our family. I will definitely share it with our Waldorf school here locally.
Thank you.
And please do keep us posted if you're doing, we were just talking about workshops and performances and other, public facing events and presentations. And please tell us, how do we find out more about your organization?
So the organization that I co-founded is called Matre Sofia, Matresofia. And you can go to our website, matresofia.org. And it is like an ecosystem to really support conscious birth and conscious parenting. And we are such a baby organization that any kind of contribution for our nonprofit is really going to help us create libraries of songs and stories and be able to do more public facing events. So you can go to our website and you can also check out my personal website, Prachi Healing, chihealing.com for personalized Ayurvedic and healing consultations.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. And thank you to everybody at home. We love that you've joined us to discuss how to make our whole world medicine. We rise or fall together and are committed to sharing knowledge and insight that empower us and our communities towards greater health. Thank you for listening to the Neuroveda Podcast for Complex Health, and we will see you next time.